Well, hey, today on the Music Money Podcast, I am so excited to speak with Dvniel Capellaro. Dvniel is a full-time LA-based professional singer, songwriter, and producer who is signed internationally to Angry Mob Music Publishing. Dvniel has written songs for artists such as Lifehouse, Maxwell, Pink, Pitbull, Chris Brown, and Boyz II Men. For Pitbull, he wrote the song Hope We Meet Again off Pitbull's platinum album Global Warming featuring Chris Brown, and he wrote Boyz II Men's song As Long As I'm With You off their album Collide. Dvniel works internationally with artists and producers, collaborating with producers such as Emil Ganthouse. I probably didn't say that right.
That's actually good.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, was it.
Philip Aaron, Steve Horner, and many more. Dvniel also releases his own music under the name Dvniel, spelled Dvniel. His recent debut EP, Nightside, features up-tempo pop tracks such as Pink Lemonade and Electric Currents, which have landed him on thousands of playlists and various radio charts internationally. And interestingly enough, especially for an older guy like me, Dvniel is also the paternal nephew of Lee Ving, the infamous lead singer and creator of the groundbreaking punk band Fear.
Nice little
Dvniel,
light jazz band.
Welcome to the Music Money Podcast. How are you doing, man?
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me. Good, dude. Thanks for thanks for having me on the show.
I'm excited about this, man. So,
yeah, me too.
But for the people that are listening, I remember Fear. I didn't really listen to Fear, but I knew who they were. I remember I just had a friend that was like real into punk rock and stuff back in the day, and had a vinyl. And I remember he had that vinyl that said "Fear, more beer,
more beer." That's his infamous calling card. And then they had another record that says "Have another beer with Fear." Have a beer with Fear. Then the follow-up is have another beer with Fear. So yeah.
That's right. Yeah, well,
it's an ongoing
better
theme.
Than like Fear 2 or something like that. I mean,
yeah, totally. Not bad for a sober guy for almost 30 years now.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
cool. I mean, I'm actually impressed that he's still living with probably with the lifestyle that they probably had at one time.
We all are, but he's doing well. Thank God.
Yeah. All right. Well, one of the main reasons I was so excited to talk to you today is that you make a full-time living writing songs.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So I have so many questions. So before we dive into how you got here, I'm just really curious, and I think the listeners would be as well. What does your day-to-day life look like? I mean, you just wake up and go to the piano and just start writing songs, or
kinda, yeah. I mean, it's obviously changed a little bit due to the pandemic, being sort of forced to stay at home. Prior to the pandemic, so I'm signed to a music publishing company here in LA, and they essentially give me an advance, and I'm allowed to write with whoever I want, for whoever I want, including myself. And then they assist me in pitching those songs to, TV shows, for trailers, for movies, for video games, for sync licensing. And so my day-to-day prior to the pandemic was there's various studios in Los Angeles that I've developed relationships with, the producers that work or rent those spaces. And oftentimes they'll be working with a new artist, whether that artist is on an indie label or if he or she's just kind of getting started and have got their own money, they're hiring him to come, produce a song or an EP, an extended play, as we call it, or a whole album. And since we're still in a kind of a singles market, people aren't really releasing full albums anymore. The listening attention span has gotten much, much shorter, which I think and because of streaming and various other things, we're still in a singles market that people would just kind of put in money just to do one song. And so I would come in as a writer. I would come in as initially in the beginning as a songwriter, to either assist the artist in arranging ideas that they may already have, melody-wise, lyric idea, sometimes just show up with a title. I want to write a song called X, and then we kind of sort of figure out what does that mean for you. And so it was almost like it's almost wearing two kinds of hats. It's like musician and psychologist, because you're also like interviewing their site, at least with respect to working with artists, if that was why I would be brought in. Other times I'd come in and collaborate with those producers at those studios. So I get in my car and I would drive to said studio. and we just build catalog together. We just kind of come up with a chord progression in hopes of being able to pitch those songs to music supervisors who are looking for specific types of songs that would fit various pitches that they may have, or artists that we knew were going to be coming into the studio in a month's time or 2 months' time, that we could sit down and play these songs in hopes of them going, hey, I want to do that one. And then at that point, we kind of figure out what that relationship's going to look like with them on paper. If there's a budget, if they're coming in and they're going to hire us to do a song or an album or an EP or just a few songs, what that's going to look like. Now, I may already be, this might just kind of just jumping into what we're doing, but songs are split into 3 different categories. There's writers, publishing, and the master, the recording of the song. And so
right.
Oftentimes what they'll do is they're paying us a production fee to build a song, to write a song. We would split the writing and publishing. For example, this one artist that we had worked with, this girl named Jordan, had come in, and we were hired by her and her parents to write and record a 3-song demo. Now, she had some stuff going on. She was an actress and working on some stuff with Disney, and Disney was interested in sort of pursuing a musical career with her. And so Emil and I, one of the gentlemen that you read the name of my bio, he and I would sit down and sort of come up with some concepts for her. But she was coming in with a budget to buy the master out because she needed to own the production. And so that master fee, she was kind of like acting like a label would act, that they're coming in and going to buy out the master. On the writing and publishing side, however, we would split that, evenly amongst the people that wrote the song, myself, Emil, and if we decided to bring in a demo singer or another writer, maybe we'll bring in since she's a female artist, we want to bring in a girl to sort of come in to have that, to be able to write more lyric that's based for a woman's perspective, and we want to have so we kind of plan that. So it's kind of trying to figure out, well, what are we writing for? What are we writing? Who are we writing for? And what's the goal? What's the end result for this? Is this a song that I'm just going to send to my publisher to see if they can pitch it for film and TV placement, which happens a lot, or are we working specifically with an artist? Now, my driving to said recording studios was taking up a lot of gas money, obviously, and I'm going all over the city. I got a session here for 2 hours in North Hollywood, and I'm in Los Angeles, by the way, and, or drive down to Santa Monica or drive to Long Beach on one trip that I have. And then when the pandemic hit and everyone was forced to stay at home, we as a community of Los Angelino songwriter and producers go, well, we gotta create a recording studio in, at the time, a small 1-bedroom apartment I was sharing with my wife. And, we're all like, how do I do that? And how do I soundproof? And the good news is technology is advanced enough so that recording studios are getting smaller and smaller. I mean, songs that you're listening to on the radio, for example, may have been created in a bedroom, or in some case on an airplane and headphones on a laptop. So, we didn't need a big space. And so these big recording studios were sort of becoming less and less common. And it was becoming cheaper for us to be able to do that. And as a result, I could save money and gas money to say, okay, well, if I just record stuff at home, or record vocals on a mic, or send ideas back via stems, or send a Logic session, the entire session to you guys, we could just build it remotely. And so that's kind of been the new norm since the pandemic. And I think a lot of people have seen in 2020, there has been so much music that has come out into the world. I mean, Spotify right now is averaging 40 million songs a week, new songs a week, 40 million. So you see the amount of songs that are coming out, the amount of material that's being produced has never been higher, because so many more people can do this. So many more people have access to this. So now it's just, my day-to-day is collaborating with producers and writers and artists internationally, like what we're doing, whether it's Zoom or whether it's FaceTime or whatever, sending ideas back and forth, or, coming up with an entire song. The long answer to your question.
Well, did you have to do like a crash course on basically home engineering, or were you already pretty savvy in that?
Kinda. No, I wasn't very savvy with it. I was very reliant, for the first few years of doing it professionally, on the producers the studios that I was going to. So they were usually engineering it, and I could stay in the background as the creative to like start throwing ideas out or get behind the mic. And for me, how it all started was when I first moved to LA, I had signed a production agreement with this producer. This is when I was 20 years old, years ago. And I came out on this production deal to LA, to Los Angeles, after I had created a demo with this guy at Sony in New York. He had found me at this Bryant Park in New York. Long story short, we put this demo together and he starts shopping it. He's a producer, starts shopping it. So we're taking meetings with L.A. Reid and Clive Davis and Peter Edge and Dave McPherson, all these major labels. Back in the day when labels would take meetings, when studio execs would take meetings.
Yeah.
And so we had sort of a soft offer from L.A. Reid when he was at Arista. And then I came out to Los Angeles, drove out here with this guy, playing all these little coffee shops and sneaking me into bars and playing acoustic sets and stuff. And I get out to.
And where were you coming from?
We left Virginia, so I was living in Virginia at the time.
That's
in Norfolk, Virginia,
all the way.
Yeah, man,
across the other side,
cross country, and we get out. I play like the grand opening of the Palms Casino Resort in Las Vegas as one of the performers, and we get out to Los Angeles, and he's kind of like, "All right, you're on your own." Like, I was like, what the hell, man? Where do I sleep? What do I do? He's like, well, I'm going to set up some meetings for us.
Man.
So we had a meeting that night, like day 2 of being there with Jimmy Iovine. And he went to a Lexus dealership. There's an artist named Craig David from early 2000s, brilliant UK singer. And he knew him, bumped into him, put my CD in one of these like on the lot cars. And Craig goes, man, his voice is great, man. I want him to meet Jimmy. Let me set up a meeting. Can he come in tonight? And I'm in Hermosa Beach. I don't know my ass from my elbow with respect to the geography of LA yet. I'm like, where's Interscope? He's like, it's in Santa Monica. And, I'm like, how far is that? And, meanwhile, this is before this was like MapQuest where I'm like printing out directions. So like, I get down there, we take a meeting and soft offer on the table. And to make a short story longer, there's a pilot that a TV show that I had an opportunity to audition for. They were remaking The Monkees on NBC. And my acting manager at the time, because I was doing a little bit of acting every now and then back in New York, calls me up, says, hey, I know you're in LA, got this opportunity to audition for the show. And I wound up booking the new Monkees. Simon Fuller, 19 Entertainment, was like the lead singer of this new band they were putting together. And I go, oh shit, this is amazing. I get this offer from Interscope. I got this TV show and this is incredible. Like, I don't even have an apartment yet. This is awesome. And then my lawyer calls me in New York and says, dude, you got to make a decision. You can't do both. And I'm like, what do you mean I can't do both? He says, well, because the TV show NBC's doing a deal with 19. You can't have 2 record deals. So I had an $850,000 record advance offer from Interscope that I turned down.
Whoa.
To take a $2,500 record advance from 19 Entertainment. But it was under the basis that I would be hired as one of the songwriters for the television series. So I was going to get writing and publishing on that. And we were set to shoot the pilot on like a Thursday after I just turned down Jimmy Iovine, who no one does that, and just turned down this record producer that I had driven cross country with. And I get a call on Tuesday from my lawyer saying, Daniel, are you sitting down? I'm like, yeah. He's like, got some bad news, bud. The show's not going. And I'm like, what do you mean? We're not shooting the pilot?
Oh my God.
He goes, no, we're not shooting the pilot. I said, what happened? He said, Simon Fuller, who owns the name The Monkees, bought the name The Monkees for $50 million, decides to create all these monkey bands internationally to help promote the brand. And NBC caught wind of that. They wanted first right. They didn't want to have anything outside of their own control for branding, and pulled out at the 11th hour. And so, here I'm out of a deal and I'm no place to live, like no money in my pocket. So I scrounged a little bit of change I had in my pocket, bought a tuxedo at Aardvarks on Melrose to start catering. And I started catering, which brought me into a restaurant that I wound up working at for 13 years. while building my catalog of
Wow.
music and networking. And finally, 5 years ago, had enough music compiled and enough relationships built to parlay that into a publishing deal to be able to do this full time. So paying dues, I know a little bit about.
I should say, man, there's so much to unpack in what you just said.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I think in all of that life experience, it just, you put it into your music. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm in the studio with artists who sing about stuff that they have not yet experienced, and how my job, I feel part of my job, I feel when it comes to the songwriter portion of it with an artist, is to try and have them tap into to their actual experiences. There needs to be a connection to that in order for it to come off as genuine, in order for it to not come off as disingenuous, or for that, it's not fair to them as well. I'll never forget Sebastian Coe, who wrote a bunch of hit songs for Alessia Cara, was I got to see him perform and get interviewed live, and he said something during his performance that really still resonates with me, where he goes, I just had all these songs with her, and I was feeling really good, and she comes in, there's this young girl who obviously doesn't have a ton of life experience yet, and their job is, like, he says, I knew that she had something in her, like I knew, she was something special. And she comes into the writing room, and he goes, what do you want to write? And she goes, oh, I don't know. And she was just not feeling it that day. She just didn't want to write anything. And he says, well, what did you do this weekend?
Mm-hmm.
She goes, I went to a party. He goes, how was it? She goes, it fucking sucked. He's like, great, let's write that. And that was her biggest hit.
Okay.
So it's sort of like, you don't, there's no, that's the beauty of writing music, is that by accident, you can find you can find a hit song in an accident. And it's sort of being open to that experience, where you have a game plan of writing this song, but when you read the room and you read the energy of the people that you're, collaborating with, maybe that's not the right move. Maybe you let them, maybe you just let something organic happen. And, sometimes magic can happen from that. I've found. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to back way up for the listeners. 'Cause I think there's probably a lot of people out there that have maybe heard the term publishing deal.
Yeah.
And still really don't know what it means.
Yeah. No, it's complicated. It can be.
So could you just explain, I mean, what is a publishing company? And you mentioned, you have an advance, and what do they do? And
so publishing companies can act in usually two different facets. There are what's called co-publishing deals, which means that a publishing company will come in, sign you. Sometimes there's an advance, sometimes there's not an advance, and they will own and operate half of your publishing. So, like I said, a song is split into a publishing portion, a writer's portion, and the master portion. And so publishing company comes in and says, we're going to own 50% of the publishing of you. So you still have 100% of your writers, but we're going to take 50% of your publishing. And in return, we're going to give you some money. We're going to give you an advance, and we're going to pitch the songs that you send us that we deem acceptable. Part of what's called your delivery commitment in your contract. We're going to pitch songs that you send to us, and place those songs in TV shows in order to recoup that money. And then once we hit the threshold, once we hit your advance amount, then we split everything 50-50 on that moving forward. That they keep that money, the first bit of that, until they reach the number of the amount of money that they've advanced you. Now that's one deal. That's the deal that I have. And those advance numbers can change drastically. It's all, for instance, I had a Pitbull song that you had mentioned that I had written, co-written with Dvniel, and I obviously have publishing on that. And I was still working at the restaurant, and he was trying to parlay this into a publishing deal at Sony. And Sony ATV came to me and offered me like $25,000 for the full year. And I thought, well, I can't live off of $25,000. I'm going to wait to see what, if I can get that number a little higher so that I don't have to do this and that, because I'm already doing this and that, and I'm burning the candle at both ends. I'm really waiting for like at least enough money to quit this day job so that I can really give myself the time, to focus on the songs, so I'm not going to the studio at 11 o'clock at night and working till 3 or 4 in the morning, just being beat and really not being super creative, just burning out. And so I turned it down because it wasn't enough. It wasn't the right deal. And I knew that if I waited, I'd get maybe another cut. And then that cut would then, raise my dollar amount, for another publishing company. Now, the second part of the publishing deals are what's called admin deals, administrative deals. And that is you get to keep 100% of your publishing. You get to keep 100% of your writers. But we're going to take 15%, it's usually the number, 15, 20% of any money that we can make on placing one of your songs. You still get to keep all your publishing, but if we get a sync for $5,000, we'll take 15% of that. You keep the rest and split it with whoever you have the other writers. And those admin deals are usually, you either give them a song or a catalog of songs, and maybe they'll admin an album that you have because they think that album might be good for, Grey's Anatomy or whatever. And then they have that, they'll be the admin, and it's usually exclusive. Sometimes it's non-exclusive, but they're usually exclusive for that catalog for said period of time, whether it be a year. It's usually about a year, 6 months, a year, 2 years, maybe. And so that's the other side. So the deal I had initially with Angry Mob, my publisher, was initially an admin deal because I didn't have enough. I didn't have any cuts at the time, and I had just had a bunch of songs. And I was like, listen, I can, let's see what we can do with these first before we sign away. You own and operating half my publishing, for a long period of time, or sometimes forever. We'll just go from there. And so sometimes you'll get an admin deal, a publishing admin deal first, if people aren't ready to, give up half of their publishing. We're also in a new age now where 20 years ago, 15 years ago, publishing was like, no one gave that away. Like, look at the Beatles catalog and look at all these, Prince and who are fighting to get they're in their case fighting to get their masters back. But that were like, never give up your publishing. And I remember my uncle Lee from Fear was like, yeah, I never give up publishing. Keep all your pub. Yeah. Now it's almost become like a Bitcoin in a way. It's almost become this like it's another form of monetary value. So I can use publishing, for instance, if I write a song with Chris Brown, or if I write a song, Chris Brown cuts it, Chris is going to want the publishing on the song, even though he may not have written a single word on the song. He's still, if he's going to put his brand behind it, the label's going to get behind it. So you can use it as sort of like a chip, say, for instance, and master as well. Say, for instance, a producer comes to you and says, hey, I can produce this track for you. It's going to cost $5,000. Meaning that you're going to pay him $5,000, this dude $5,000. You will then be buying the master from him. So that producer owns no master anymore since you're paying for the production. You're paying for the master. Right. You're essentially acting as the label. You're buying that out. Well, I say, okay, cool. Instead of $5,000, what if I gave you 50% of the master? He's like, well, yeah, we could do it for free then if you're going to give me half the master, because we all know that if a sync lands, say you get $100,000 sync and he's got 50% of the master on that, the sync license will pay half of the fee up front, meaning the master portion, and the other half is the writing publishing. So he's set to make, X amount of dollars on that up front. That's way more than $5,000. So there are huge benefits in not being signed to a traditional major label deal or a label deal that they own and operate your masters, because that's yet another tool that you can use to mitigate costs. And that's what I've been in the midst of doing with various DJs and producers internationally. I have this album that I put out late last year called Nightside A, and I have the follow-up to that was Nightside B. And Nightside B was a collection of all of the songs from A, but remixes of all of those songs. So I was reaching out to DJs all over the world to see if they'd want to do a remix. Now, usually they say, great, it's $2,000, it's $1,500, whatever their fee is, or five, whatever. And I said, great, I'm not going to pay you anything, but I am going to give you half of the master, which is a much higher number than they're normally used to hear. And they're like, normally I get 2 points or 3 points, meaning 2% or 3% on the song. But you're going to give me 50%, half of it. Because in my mind, it's this team building. I can come back to them and they say, dude, work with this guy. He'll give you half the master. He's half the master. Holy shit. I'll do another remix for you. What else do you want? And meanwhile, my need is I need content.
Yeah.
I need the song done. I need it done well. And, there's a lot I can do with half the master. There's a lot, so that's the publishing. That's the publishing deal and then some. But yeah, that's kind of my deal that I have with them. And I get to write with whoever I want to write with. It's not
cool.
Yeah, it's not like there's some publishers that say you can only write, like Universal, for instance. They typically, I don't know how they are now, but they typically like to have Universal, Warner Chappell as well, like to write with other Warner Chappell writers or other Universal writers. And they're like, no, you can't write with them because they're on, they're in a different publishing company. My publisher is independent, and it's been beautiful because they've allowed me to write and with anybody I've wanted to. And it's really sort of expanded all of our relationships for the better.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So again, kind of going back to, not really dumb it down, but I still think there's a lot of mystery behind sync.
Yes.
What it is, or how do I get into it? It seems like, I literally bought a course on it. It was actually quite good, just so I could understand it, just so I can understand the world and how the whole thing works.
Sure.
Now, if you're giving away, because it sounds like if you're giving away half your master to attract those DJs, that would depend on if the song actually gets placed. So if you could, I'm wondering how often does that happen? So if you could just kind of back up and explain, okay, how does sync licensing work?
It's not just the sync portion of it too. You can make money on the master for radio play. Terrestrial radio play is still king financially. So you can make more money on terrestrial radio than you can with streaming. As we know, the streaming numbers are so unbelievably low. So, you get a song playing on the radio and someone has 50% of the master, they're going to be making a little bit more money than they would be, if I had just given them their fee, essentially. So sync licensing, every TV show has a music supervisor that's looking for music. Those music supervisors sometimes work to expand that network with agents that work with them, that are the scouts that are up on Spotify all the time, or on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, looking for new music. And most of them are also working very closely with publishing companies who have who get what's called sync briefs, which are when music supervisors are looking for songs for said show. Usually it's not divulged what the show is in the brief. It's usually kept pretty private. But for instance, I'd get a brief, or my publisher may get a brief that says, we're looking for songs that are that are emotional, that are female vocal, that are mid-tempoed, that sort of elicit the feeling of desire, but yet there's a sense of loss, but it's not romantic loss. It's more loss of oneself, and it's more. So sometimes they can get that specific, and they'll have references. We like the vocal tone of this artist, and they'll have a YouTube link. We like the sentiment. We don't want words like, and they'll have a list of words that they don't want in there. Sometimes they can get that specific, and I may get that brief from my publisher, and I go into my catalog. Even though I've been sending them songs, they're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of songs and dozens of writers. So I go into my catalog and I say, well, what do I have that's kind of like that? And then I'll resend it to them and say, this might be a good fit. And then they'll pitch it. And then we just sit back and keep our fingers crossed that that music supervisor likes that song and wants to use it. And then if they do, then you've just landed a song in a television show or a movie. Now there are different facets of the sync itself too. So you can get a song that's, for instance, I had a song placed on a TV show that it was in a scene and it was being played on the radio of the car that they had turned on for a second. And I think it was like 10 seconds or something that was in this scene, which is kind of long, but it played and then they turned it off. Now that fee is significantly less than it would have been had it been playing in the scene, just as an undertone. It's a different music license. It's a different contract. So you can get, I think that was like $700 or $800 for them just to play that song there. Whereas if it was playing in the scene, it might have been $2,500 or $5,000, depending. Now there's also, on the sync side, there's also trailer songs, promo songs, as they're called, CBS promo, where it's a 15-second promo that you see, or a 30-second promo, or sometimes a 1-minute promo that you see on television. And there's a song that's playing during that. They pay really well. Those pay really high, really hard to get those as well. And there's so many websites out there, like Taxi, Music X-Ray, that are they're the middlemen between you getting your song in front of these music supervisors. And you're among hundreds, if not more, people that are submitting music for these projects. But I think some of them are annual fees, some of them are just like a one-time submission fee. They all work, they're all legitimate. It's just, obviously the competition is that much harder because there's so many people that get to use that, because it's sort of, free access. One of the things my publisher always tells their writers, which I think is important for anybody trying to get into sync, is you got to listen to the music that's on the shows. Nowadays with Spotify and Apple Music, there are playlists that these shows create with the music that they have put on their show. If you think you have a song that would be good for, let's use Grey's Anatomy as an example, but your song sounds nothing like the songs that they've synced on Grey's Anatomy, maybe maybe that's not the best choice, listen to the stuff that's there. And also like be in tune with like what's going on now. Like right now, orchestral strings are really big right now in sync. So you hear all these, you hear like a string quartet playing with a pop song and it's stripped down. Those are being synced a lot, I've noticed, in TV shows, like Bridgerton, and there's a couple of shows on Netflix that seems to be like the hot trend now. So it's sort of like getting in tune with that. And then lastly, with respect to like getting your song pitched and placed for an artist, or DJs now are artists. DJs are now considered artists as well, not just DJs. I have found that like, for instance, this guy, Max Berga in Sweden, and I write a lot of music together. He and I wrote my first single, Lie to Me, which came out a couple years ago on my solo project. And we've written dozens of songs between then and now. And we have been pitching songs to DJs internationally to get them to have that be their first single featuring me on the vocal. And we've noticed that it's been a lot easier to pitch those songs as a piano and vocal as opposed to with the production. And I think primarily as a producer, as a songwriter, when you hear a song produced, that's how you hear it. It almost sounds like it's done. And when you are asking someone to produce it and make it their version, if you send them something that's just the composition, that's just the chords and this, they can start thinking about the production, and they're more prone to be like, let me take a stab at this, as opposed to being like, you just sent me a finished song. How can I make this better? It already sounds good. You know what I mean? It kind of limits your pitch. So we've been writing the song and producing it out, or writing it to a produced track. And then once it's done, we take all the vocal stems and we take all the production out and just put piano or just put guitar and then pitch that out. Even though we know what our version produced sounds like, their version is going to sound totally different. And that's been successful.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's been working quite well.
Well, and it provides, you're allowing them to have their own inspiration, because really it's a melody, it's a
Exactly
song,
what it is. Yeah. Yeah. And
and they can
yeah.
go.
Yeah. No, sorry. You're looking at it as these DJs and producers are in need of vocalists and songs, and the vocalists and artists are looking for the audience that these DJs have and the production. So it's this, mutually exclusive benefit that's it just benefits both parties if you just strip it back. So
Interesting. Now on sync licensing as well, isn't there? Because you hear kind of about like you mentioned, sometimes you might get paid $3,000 up front, $5,000. Is there also an element of, if that goes into syndication?
yeah, absolutely.
I always think about the guy that had that bass sound on Seinfeld.
Yeah,
It's like that guy get a check every time that happens. He has to be the richest man in sync.
Totally. Yeah. Or look at, what was it, Randy Newman, I Love L.A.
Yeah.
Played it every baseball. It's like every single time that plays, every single time it goes into syndication, it gets on reruns. That's where the PROs come in, the performance rights organizations, whether it be BMI or ASCAP or CSAC, or who are monitoring the amount of times your song is being performed. Which in this case it would be, if it's on television, it's a PRO. It's being performed on this television show. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. You can now, that amount of money may change. If we're talking about a TV commercial, who work in options, and they're going to buy out an option, the first option, which is 3 months or 6 months or 2 months or however long their option is, they'll pay you the upfront for that option. And then you'll get your back end, your publishing and your writers on the back end. Mm-hmm. Master is the upfront. And then if they decide to re-air that commercial again, they pay you again the option. They'll pay you again the upfront. So to get a song on a TV commercial, now we get millions of TV commercials because everything's done by 15 seconds, everything. But there's stuff that still gets renewed. You can make even more money doing that because they keep paying your option. With TV, it's usually like the syndication is just the back end. So you'll still get your writing and publishing on the back end. But you're right, you can make a boatload of money if you just. I always say you just need one, and it is an act. It's so hard to get that one, but you can get that one. It's crazy.
Well, the other thing too is that what's interesting about television right now, I mean, they call it the golden age of television, which I do believe. I still think Breaking Bad is probably one of the greatest shows that ever aired.
We are in agreement on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, Game of Thrones and all this incredible television is being made, and there's just so much of it.
There's so much content. There's so much content. I mean, it's so hard.
My wife and I, we got a hot tub. That's one of the best pandemic things we ever did.
That's awesome.
Put it on our back porch.
That's awesome.
But then I had to plus it. So for Christmas, I bought like this TV and a little cheap stereo because it's like semi outdoors. And what we do is we get in the hot tub and we watch. But that was my first experience with Hulu.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, so I can just sit here. I don't have to hook the cable up because it's basically internet TV.
Totally. It's exactly
and there's so much stuff to watch. And I remember when I was taking that course on sync licensing, the guy said, I never actually did this, but the thought was, listen to TV with the sound or with your eyes closed, and you'll realize how much music is actually happening.
Oh, true.
It's almost constant, in a way,
Absolutely right.
So you multiply how there's so much music happening in these shows times the number of actual shows that are being created on these obscure channels, and it's a huge market.
Yeah, another thing to do too, that I used to do with my production partner and writing partner, a guy named Steve Horner, is he's a very successful composer and producer, and in fact, he was the short film that he scored was nominated for an Academy Award in 2019. So he went to the Oscars and stuff. Brilliant musician. And I always, in the midst of working with him on our stuff, that we had this project called Red Boy, which was this very sync licensing, trailery, big, epic, kind of music. I would watch him score and he would say, like, mute the audio and play your song in that scene and see if it evokes anything. See if you feel anything. Because if you're playing the scene and you're thinking to yourself, oh, this would be a good, I just got this sync brief, so I'm gonna like pitch my song to it. Find a scene that's similar to what they're talking about and play the song that you think would be a good pitch in that scene and see if it does anything. Because like you said, it's amazing when you mute it. Music can make or break a scene. Absolutely can make or break. Yeah. You can have the wrong piece of music in a scene very, very, very easily. And I've seen it before where I'm like, wow, what is this song in here? Like it's not helping to push the story along, or it's taking away from the scene that was a bad placement. Or I've seen other ones quite the opposite more often than not, where you're just like, oh my God, like this song is just like, it's so emotional. But then as soon as you mute it, you're like feeling nothing. So you're like, wow, this music's really doing everything. Yeah. Like this is creating the entire vibe. So it is, I think it's really like it's testing your own stuff, your own music in that to see if it would fit, if you think it would fit,
Cool. So now I don't want to blow past the fact that you have written some songs for some pretty famous folks, famous artists. And so first I want to ask, what percentage of time do you spend, I don't know, time, it's time spent, or basically songs for artists that people know or don't even know, or don't know, versus sync. And then I really want to ask you about like working with the artist themselves. So
yeah. The songs that I had gotten placed with the major label artists like Chris Brown, I was working that story in particular because I think that was the first one here in LA that I had for that big of an artist. I was working with this guy named Emil. Emil, again, like true Hollywood story kind of stuff. My mom at the time was working at Cantoni, which is this like high-end Italian furniture store here in Los Angeles. And Emil, recently married, was going in with his wife to buy a rug. And he's a music producer. And my mom, being awesome, says, hey, my son's a musician. You guys should talk. And he's like rolling his eyes like, oh God, here we go.
Yeah, exactly.
And so reluctantly, he gives her his information. I email him a couple links to some music of mine, and he liked it enough to be like, come over to the studio. I'm in North Hollywood. So I show up, and it's like all these like, there's other studios in the building, all this one-story building. There's all these like plaques on the wall, like Bieber and David Guetta. And I mean, like major label people. And I was like, holy shit, where am I? And I get to the end of the hall. His studio's at the end. And we just hit it off immediately. And he's like, how are you with top lining? And I'm like, what's top lining? I don't know what that is. He's like, well, I have a beat. I have like, piano and a beat. Go into the studio, put on your headphones and just write a song. And I go, oh, okay. Never done that before.
Pressure.
No pressure at all. He was like auditioning me. And we wound up writing a song right on the spot together because it was just so much fun, and became fast friends. And he had been working with, he had a hit with a band named JLS, and he had done like a bunch of songs for Boyz II Men, and most notably Charlie Wilson. He's had like a bunch of songs with Charlie Wilson and Frankie J, who I was a huge fan of. And I'm like, you're friends with Frankie J? This is so cool. Like, you're working with him? It's like, yeah. Nice. So we just started writing a whole bunch of music together and just became friends. And it was when we got a note from whoever it was, Mike Caron Atlantic. It was somebody at a label that said, hey, we've got One Direction coming to LA and they're looking for songs. So he and I just like intensive, like went in and we like wrote a bunch of songs to be a pitch, because we knew that the label was going to come in and listen to some of these songs. And they wound up taking none of them. But we had another band called The Wanted. There was like this man band in the UK that was also looking for songs. And across the hall from Emil was Adam Messenger and Nasri Atois, who are most notably formed the band Magic. Why You Gotta Be So Rude. They are literally across the hall. And Nasri had written for everybody. And he comes in. He's like, oh, I like that beat you guys are working on. Because again, just a community of artists, of writers and musicians. And Nasri and I just kind of like spit this melody on the mic together, where he jumps in and then I jump in, and we kind of like write this hook, this chorus. and we got a chorus, and the verses are me, and again we're like pitching this thing, so we're done, and all of a sudden Chris Brown, I wasn't there that day, but Chris Brown comes in to work with Nasri on this song, Please Don't Judge Me, which is a song I think that's the one they were working on, that Nasri wrote for Chris. And he hears the song through the wall and comes in the studio. Wow. He goes, "Yo, this is dope. Can I jump in and cut the chorus?" I'm not there. Emil's calling me. He's like, "Yo, Chris is in the studio right now singing the chorus." So Chris sings the chorus of the song, and then typical fashion, he's like, "All right, I'm out." And we're like, "Dude, we've got verses. Like, you've got to cut the whole, like, what do we do? We've got Chris Brown on the chorus and then me on the verses." And I'm like, "What do we do with this?" And Emil, being the very savvy businessman that he is, was like, "Okay, we got Chris on the hook." As we call the chorus the hook. We got him on the hook. You're on the verses. Yeah. Chris isn't releasing an album anytime soon, so it's not going to be on him. So what's the next step? Well, let's pitch it to rappers. Let's see if rappers can do on the verses and keep Chris on the hook. So at the time, Chris was going through all that stuff with Rihanna, and he was not liked by many people in the industry. So we were trying to find out, like, which rappers don't hate Chris Brown right now, and so or who had worked with him in the past and liked him. And Pitbull's in Miami, and so Emil had a contact to his manager somehow. I think he just ghost mailed him or something, and we sent him the track. And true story, Pitbull records all his vocals in a hotel bathroom. So he's got a hotel bathroom that he's renting, and he just tracks it right there on the spot and then sends us an MP3. Pitbull doesn't send WAV files or AAC files. He sends MP3s, and those are the actual it's the final file that you will hear on every single Pitbull song you'll ever hear is an MP3 file. So he sends Emil an MP3 file of his rap, and then we sent it to was the label, Sony, I think was the label that was doing that one. And we sent it to them, and he calls me up. He says, "Yeah, they're going to release it." We thought it was going to be a single. If it was a single, we would have made a lot of money on that record, because you got to think, like, it went we knew it was going to do well. It's Pitbull. It was like his upcoming album. Yeah. Christina Aguilera single that was on it, which Nasri wrote, the guy across the hall, he wrote that song. He made gajillion dollars off of that song because he had like 15% publishing writers on it. And it went, I can't remember how much money. I think they made like over $6 million on that song, just in radio. Wow. So we were like, I was like, "Dude, this is it. I can go back to Sony and be like, yo, take your $25,000 and crank that bitch up a little bit more. We're gonna be going to Nobu for dinner, baby." And it turned out not to be a single. So, which, obviously was devastating, but it was still, you still made a little bit. Made like a few $1,000s on that song. But not more than that. You'd think that you get a song with a major label artist, and you're going to make a crap ton of money. But the truth is, you're really at the mercy of like terrestrial radio still. Clear Channel's still turning out a whole bunch of money, and it's wild because it's such a broken system. It's such an old system. The streaming is the new, but with streaming, with Spotify, it's on average like 0.00065 cents to a stream.
Yeah, it's insane.
So there's no real money in streaming unless you start getting into the hundreds of millions of streams or billions of streams or anything like that. Then you can start seeing some money. But yeah, that was the story with the Pitbull song. So I got this beautiful plaque that's hanging on my wall in my studio that probably costs more money than the money I made on the record. Truth be told, my brother. But it's the industry, and it gave Emil and I some street cred. We had our cut together, and
yeah, for sure.
It was we had all this other music that we were working on, and he was really good and still is really good with like knowing who to pitch songs to, what they like. Like, for example, Mike Caron, who I think he's one of the vice presidents now, but at the time he was a senior A&R at Atlantic Records. Mike Caron loves questions in hooks. So if you have a question, loves questions. Why you gotta be so rude? That's a question.
Yeah.
So the opening line of the chorus is, we're always trying to be like, all right, Mike likes questions. Like, we got to ask a question. That's the opening line of our choruses. So we had a whole bunch of songs that had questions as the opening line. Those kinds of idiosyncratic things that you're like, you don't expect to have to worry about or even think about, all play a role. All play a role. The lyrics are important, even though Under My Umbrella, Ella, clearly not a very deep song. They are important. And then they're coming back. I'm a firm believer that harmonies are coming back, that lead guitar solos are coming back, and in some way, shape, or form, horns are coming back. All that stuff.
Come on.
It all
Funk.
cyclical. It's true. Look at the thing that Bruno, just put together. That's it's straight out of the 1970s. It's like, exactly what it is. It's not none of it sounds contemporary outside of a little bit of the production. It's as throwback as you can possibly be. Even the wardrobe, even the visual, that's all about it. It's that's why.
Well,
I was just saying, like, that's why, like, when someone says, "Oh, this is so new," it's like, no, it's not. Do your musical research, like on a history lesson. That's ABBA. That's like 1974, right on the money, man. Like that, you don't. That's Bread, the anthology. Like that's Bread,
man.
yeah. So, like,
in fact, my wife and I, as part of our hot tub adventure, for some reason, my wife got onto Yacht Rock.
Yeah.
Some people don't even know what Yacht Rock is.
Yacht Rock is awesome. I love it.
But Bread would fall into that. Totally. Ambrosia, some of these.
Yeah.
Basically, it was 70s soft rock.
Yeah, exactly.
But with me as a songwriter, the thing that I just find myself always, and the thing that I did like about the new Bruno song is that the chords, the harmony, the borrowed chords, the writing outside the diatonic scale, right. It's the music is fairly complex.
It is,
but not overly so to where it's pretentious.
Right.
To me, the music is more interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that that's the thing that's going to come back around.
I agree with you. And you also hear that it's not busy. I think ultimately, like, the producer's job is to make sure that the song is heard. And so their job is to be as minimal or specific, choose the right elements as possible, because ultimately that's the biggest thing is the song. So when you hear back the production to their new single, for instance, like, it's minimal. The production's minimal, even though, like you said, you're right. The chords the arrangement is very R&B. It's very throwback. It's interesting. It's not the traditional, 4 chords or 3 chords that you hear at every single pop song, but yet the pocket of the drums, you can hear every bit of the song. You can hear the vocal where it's supposed to be. All the parts are exactly where they need to be. Because it would have been very easy to overproduce that song.
For sure. So I'm sure that there are people that are listening to this that, for one, thank you so much. This has been, you've really opened my eyes, and I think the listeners as well, to just this world and what it is. And so the number one question is, how does somebody get into this? I definitely want to ask, do you think it's necessary to be in LA or Nashville?
So that's such a good question, man, because I battled with that for so long. It's like you get to LA because you think LA is a city that you need to be in, and then you get that itch, like, well, shit, man, I'm writing some country stuff. Maybe I got to be in Nashville. And you go to Nashville for a little while, which I did. I was there like once a month for years. And I for like 3 years I was there almost every month or every other month. And Nashville's a funny city. I grew up in the South, and Nashville's all about paying dues. Nashville's all about, and a lot of that's that Southern mentality where it's like, there's a little bit of a chip on the shoulder if you're not from the South, that you sort of can come in here and, you gotta do the Strip, man. You gotta do the writing rooms. You gotta do Broadway. You gotta do that whole vibe for a minute. And at the time, I didn't want to move to Nashville. I'm going into meetings, writing rooms in Nashville, putting on my country Western hat, because I do write country music as well. And that's not what they wanted to hear. For the most part, these producers that I was going into writing rooms were like, what do you have that sounds like Selena Gomez? What do you have that sounds like Bieber? What do you have that's like the poppest stuff you have? Because for the most part, they don't have that there. And they're trying to fill that. The publishers there are trying to find that more pop direction. And you've seen it as well, like Dan and Shay, like all these bands that are coming out of Nashville that don't, that because, thankfully Taylor Swift, I almost single-handedly tore that genre down, which is beautiful, was what happening when I saw it. It was like this dichotomy in Nashville of the country western music that I grew up with, the Clint Black, Randy Travis, the Conway Twitty stuff. And then there was this other side of Nashville where there are vegan restaurants and coffee shops and stuff across the street from the barbecue joints that were trying to do, like the next David Guetta single. And I'm like, what's good? There's like this identity crisis, but at the same time, it was awesome. My biggest piece of advice, and I've said this to friends of mine too, that are like constantly moving around, stay put, because your network, the team that you build, doesn't matter if you're in Boise, Idaho, Los Angeles, Austin. There are cities in the United States that are obviously more music centric, LA being one of them. New York is another one. Chicago, obviously. I'm sure where you are in Florida, there's a massive community. Austin, there's a big community. Portland, there's a big community. So yeah, to situate yourself in an environment where you can bump together, bump around with people in person to collaborate, very important. But then stay there. It's taken me almost 20 years of being in LA to put together the teams that I'm working with now. It takes time. If I'm any lesson for any of your listeners who are like young or feeling like they may be too old for this, or, I just turned 40 a couple weeks ago, and I'm still pursuing a pop singing career at 40 years old. Now, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was being told by music producers, you're too old to do pop music. And I'm like, yeah, the stuff that you're listening to or the stuff you think you're comparing to, but listen, music is transformative. Music is constantly changing, and so is the listener. And so find your niche, find the people that you work well with that have a similar goal in mind and sort of see music similarly as you do. And take chances. Like, I remember the first meeting I had with Steve Horner, who again is a film composer, and here I am coming in as a pop singer-songwriter. When we first met, you'd never think, why would you guys even meet? But my publisher set up the meeting and says, I think you guys would just get along. And Steve and I were like instant friends. Steve is in his like late 50s, even though he looks and acts like he's 35. And so he's like almost my dad's age at the time. And we just got together. And I'm like, let's just write some music. We wrote one song that's kind of had a pop element with this like sort of trailery kind of a sound to it, like this big epic. And then I just looked at Steve because he's from Omaha. And I said, you want to make a country record together? He's like, yeah, why not? So we put together this band called Chasing Trains and did like 8 songs. And it was so much fun. I think ultimately is like kind of the antithesis of what I said before, like knowing who your market is, knowing what to write. Sometimes you just got to just say, fuck it. I want to just do something that I'm feeling in the moment. It's organic. And I didn't know what the end result was going to be there, but I was able to bring a lot of those songs to Nashville because it was like, here's a pop sentiment, but with this sort of, country flair to it. So yeah, I mean, I'd say stay put is, there's a time investment that's required in the city that you're in. And now that for the most part, all of this can be done virtually, kind of doesn't matter. I could move to Alaska and still write and produce and get music out there. And if the pandemic's taught us anything, it's just to transition into having home studios. And you can buy a mic, the SM7 that I'm on, it's a $500 mic. You can get a Focusrite Scarlett interface for a couple $100. I've got an M Audio key station keyboard I can program stuff on. I got HS8 Yamaha monitors, which are I think the most expensive thing I have in here. And then that's all I need. I could make an entire record in a small space. So.
And how many instruments do you play?
I sing and I play guitar and a little piano. I can fake it on the piano. I can write enough to write a song too. That's all. And ultimately that's all you need. And then I can hire the real professionals to come in and replay all the parts. But yeah.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, because I play bass. I play a little bit of keyboards. and I sing, but I do write songs. And I, just going back, I mean, a band in a way is always a collaboration.
Totally.
And the best thing that I learned that at an early age. I started my first real band when I was 15 and stayed in that band until I was 21.
Oh, cool.
And the fact that I could play with musicians, and just so happened that those musicians were older than me.
Yeah.
They seemed so old at the time, and I realize now that they were only 20.
Yeah. Totally.
But still, that 5-year span, they were like, they were experienced. They had played in bar bands and stuff like that. And, but I had song ideas, and I found out that a lot of those guys didn't.
Yeah.
But they could come up with something if I gave them a little bit of direction or that kind of thing. And I was like, wow, this process is amazing. I can have something come out of my head, and now we're actually doing it, and it's even better than I envisioned it.
Yeah, it's so true. Like Chet, for instance, our mutual friend Chet. Shout out to Chet, such a cool dude and super, super, super talented. We have, as you know, formed this like rock band of sorts. 3 of the guys being in Florida and myself being here in LA. And all touring musicians in their own right. They've played a lot of live shows and stuff. And under the basis of just wanting to put some rock and roll music out. That's it. As simple as that. Obviously with the back heel of like, maybe we can get this stuff placed, or maybe we could do some live shows, and then I could fly out there and we could, make a little money doing that, et cetera. But the idea was when we had our first Zoom call, I said, I want to make sure we know what our roles are in this, because I'm all for, I'll write the song. I don't care. If you guys want me to be the main writer, I'll write the whole song. I'll track all the vocals, and I'll still only take 25% of the song, because I look at this as a team. This is four people. What you guys can do that I don't do well is the musician part of it. Pinder, you're a hell of a drummer. Make sure the drums, make sure that pocket, make sure all those fills. You guys worry about that. Send me a track that's at least locked into a metronome of a verse, a pre and a chorus, or just a verse and a chorus. I'll write the song. I'm fine with that. At least we know our roles in it. You know what I mean? And so I think, like you said, the first band I was ever in was a band called Daybreak, which was my uncle's name of his jazz fusion band before he started Fear. And I asked him, I was like, is it okay if I steal this name? He's like, yeah, it's okay. It was a Cream cover band. And I was 17 years old. We played White Room, Crossroads. We played Sunshine of Your Love. We played every Cream song, every Clapton hit you could think of, every Ginger Baker hit you could think of. And I was 16, 17 years old. We were living in Bucks County, Pennsylvania at the time. So it's like a hippie community. And so they loved it. And it was 4 guys in high school that had a Cream cover band. Like nobody had that. So our fans were all my dad's age, and that was music I grew up with, because my dad always had that shit playing, it was like Rush, that like Bonnie Raitt, Paul Simon, all that shit had to be playing all the time in the house. Had to be playing all the time. So, but I say it now and I'm like, do you imagine a 16-year-old kid in a Cream cover band now? Nah, not so much. But yeah.
I know. I in a way, it's a damn shame, because that's the one thing that I've, even with my son, because you mentioned playing music all the time. My son is a drummer, although he's more of a marching band drummer. He's in college. Cool. Actually, just finished his senior year of college.
Oh wow!
But he did drum kit a little bit, but never really had the desire to put a band together. I mean, come on. I mean, his dad, he's never known me when I wasn't in a band.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, I could totally have hooked him up with a place to rehearse, all this kind of stuff. But the desire has to be there for you to get together and jam with your buddies and do a thing.
Totally. And it's, and it's so, bands are so hard, because there's usually like 1 or 2 of the 4 or 5 members that are real the workhorses, and the other guys, may not be as involved. It's hard to get everybody as passionate and as involved at the same time. You just get to a point where you're like, listen, like, I don't mind giving up a portion of the percentages of the writer, whatever it is, just to keep you here, just to keep you excited about it. Because if one single goes, it's like my uncle's band Fear, those guys, he's now has the original members in the band now, from back in the late 70s, early 80s, Spit Sticks, like they're all the original dudes in the band now. But he had these guys for years, for almost 20 years, I think. and they opened for the Misfits at the MGM Grand like three years ago. It was Alkaline Trio, Fear, and then the Misfits. So
Nice.
I go out to Vegas, and dude, it was so wild, man. Like, this is such an aside, but I had dinner with fucking Glenn Danzig and Doyle from the Misfits. I'm sitting there like eating at a table, and I invited my buddy too, and he's eating. He's like, "What the fuck is happening right now? This is so dope. This is so crazy." But like, the idea was like, they made good money on the show there, even though he writes all of his music. It's only him that writes it. He's sharing that. You play a gig like that, you can make a decent amount of money, and you're splitting that. So it's definitely an investment on a band for time. Everyone's got to believe in the, in the commonality of the success of the band. Otherwise it's doomed. And that's why you see so many members, to go through, we went through our fifth bass player, in 6 months, like we can't keep it. But in LA, it's even harder because these dudes usually say yes when live shows were happening, say yes to all these gigs. So I remember I had a bass player named Ethan Farmer who was playing with Christina Aguilera that I had hired to come in to play a show with me. And he shows up when I'm like sound checking at the Whiskey on Sunset, and he's like not showing up, and I'm like kind of panicking. We're headlining, he's not even there yet. So he misses the sound check, and I'm like texting him. He's like, "Yeah, I'll be there. He was at another gig. He was doing another gig, so he was leaving that gig to get to my gig. So he shows up like as we're getting on stage. He like gets up there. Now he's such a pro that he's like totally locked in. Like, the songs aren't complicated anyway, so he's like dialed in. But yeah, those kinds of things where you're like, you'll see your guitar player at like 10 other shows, because they're just playing. Yeah. There's as many gigs as possible, hoping for that act to take off. You know what I mean? To be like the next touring thing. So, but
yeah, that's a whole different world. I mean, there is some of that happens, and even in small town Florida or this area that we're in. I've and as a band leader with 8 people, after a while, I was like, look, I had to set my foot down.
Yeah, so it's a lot.
Our band is the priority.
Yeah,
and if you're not cool with that, we can part as friends. Yeah. But it has to be the priority, because I'm trying to put out a super tight product. Our band is known for being tight, and I can't have just
especially a funk
any
band.
Drummer come in.
Yeah, totally. It's all about the tightness of a funk band. So
yeah. So, but the cool thing, on the other, from their perspective, I mean, they're part of something really cool. We always play, we usually have really great crowds, and, it's fun, especially though I always think about the horn players, because the horn players, especially like sax players and stuff, they can go out and get decent paying wedding gigs and things like that. Sure. But it's kind of lame, whereas they could play for some of our crowds, and it's a lot of fun. So anyway, but we could go on the band stuff, but you've already been more than gracious with your time here.
Man, I think this is awesome. It's such a pleasure to connect. We'll have to do some music together too, dude.
Oh man, I'd love it. You mentioned Pinder. Pinder's your drummer?
Pinder's our drummer. Yeah. He's such a nice. They're all like I'm like, how could all these guys be this nice? Like I guess I've been working with a bunch of assholes bands lately.
You've been in LA too long.
I'm like, you guys are way too kind. What's going on here? There's gonna be shoes gonna drop at some point. Yeah, Pinder, and then man. David Traver is the bass player.
I don't know him. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Pinder, actually, because Chet and I worked together originally in the wedding band, and then I told you that story off the record, and Pinder was the drummer who came in kind of after the fact.
Oh, I see.
And so
cool.
I actually played I got a last minute call from the band leader to come back in and sub on bass for a gig in Barbados.
No way. Oh, that's cool.
I was like, he was like, dude, it'll be the swankiest gig ever. We played literally for an audience of billionaires, not millionaires.
Wow.
Billionaires.
Wow.
That were doing this charity event. And then they put us up in this swanky hotel, came home with $1,000 in my pocket, and a great story. And Pinder was there. He was the drummer.
What a good gig, man. If all gigs can be like that. Oh, I have a dear friend here named Leo Gallo, an insanely talented singer. And he does some gigs every day. He does like this. There's like an agency here that deals like with wedding band stuff. That's so LA. But he goes to Hawaii quite a bit for weddings. So he's like constantly in Hawaii doing another gig. And I'm like, you bastard, you figured it out. This is so cool. So good.
Yeah, man. Well, there's probably not a lot of bands on the island.
No, they're all being flown in
Hawaii,
I'm sure.
So they do probably have to import, you know, and if you're going to do a wedding in Hawaii and hire a band, you probably have money.
Yeah,
so
it's true.
Okay, but enough band talk. That's a whole other podcast. I can see. So, all right. Well, Daniel, thank you so much.
Right,
and do you have any new music you're putting out yourself anytime soon?
Yes, I've got an upcoming EP called Bedside A. All of these have a side reference: Night Side A, Night Side B, Bedside A. And so the first single from Bedside A should be coming out the middle of April. And the EP will follow. And then the B side of Bedside is going to be an orchestral string quartet version that I'm going to be doing live. And then I'm currently working on the follow-up EP to that, which is called Neon Side A, which is going to be a very 80s pop 4 or 5 song EP that I'm going to be putting out. Kind of like Owl City meets like George Michael kind of a vibe, which is going to come out, which will be fun.